Hello, this is Walter Bosley, and I'm going to read Chapter 23 from Empire of the Wheel by Walter Bosley and Rick Spence. This is from Volume 1. Chapter 23. And I start with a quote from Bram Stoker. The past and the present and the future seem to mingle in one wild, chaotic, whirling dream, from the mass of which thoughts and ideas seemed now and again to fly out unexpectedly on all sides, as do sparks from hot iron under the hammer. That is from The Mystery of the Sea. The fruit doesn't fall far from the tree, it is said. If the San Bernardino working deaths were something more than an isolated local incident, particularly if they were the work of a group, might they have associations to other killings linked by geomorphology, yet separated by time? From December of 1968 through the fall of the following year, the San Francisco Bay Area, indeed all of California, was terrorized by a serial killer who dubbed himself the Zodiac. The Zodiac killer would ultimately claim 37 victims, while others have credited him with as many as 49. His documented toll is far smaller, but still frightening. During his murderous spree, he undisputedly attacked 7 persons, killing 5, and he was considered the prime suspect in at least 2 other prior attacks, resulting in 3 slayings. One of these early 2 attacks was perpetuated in Riverside, California, very near the location of our Empire of the Wheel mystery. There is neither shortage of material nor theories about the Zodiac Killer case, and it is not our intention to rehash them or offer a solution to the identity of the killer. Nor are we going to insist that there was any direct connection between Zodiac and what we have termed the San Bernardino working. Indeed, on the surface, the cases would appear to have nothing in common. Our 1915 killer, or killers, were faceless and silent, and if our postulation holds water, the murderous deeds were not the work of one hand, but many. The Zodiac, on the other hand, was as publicly boastful and sneeringly arrogant as Jack the Ripper. Also, like the Ripper, the Zodiac's effusions may be considered a cult in a general sense, which begins to hint at similarity with our case. His letters to the press taunted authorities and offered up arcane, coded clues to his methods and identity. Despite this, the Zodiac was never caught, nor even definitively identified. In the end, he simply fell silent. When and if he stopped killing is another matter of debate. Among the assorted clues the Zodiac left behind, there is one suggestive of at least a tangential link to our case. Basic credit for the discovery goes to writer Michael F. Cole, who has developed 2 interesting theories about the Zodiac. Additionally, however, in 1980, researcher Gareth Penn made a significant discovery in the Zodiac Killer case, which has even landed him on some theorists' suspect list. It was based on a statement from the killer that the Mount Diablo code concerns radians plus $inches along the radians. Going on a map and other clues supplied by the Zodiac, Penn superimposed the killer's crosshairs symbol on the peak of Mount Diablo, a prominent geographic feature just east of San Francisco Bay. Extending the lines of the compass-like symbol, Penn found that an angle of approximately 1 radian, which is 360 over 2 pi, or congruent with 57.296 degrees, connected the Blue Rock Springs crime scene with the Stein murder scene. Cole's reanalysis of this discovery led him to conclude that the angle in question was not a radian, but a 60-degree angle. Cole explains that degrees and radians are roughly equivalent but not equal units of measure. In other words, 360 degrees of a circle equals the 2 pi radians that also define the circle. They may each define the same area, but their individual measures are different. Cole argues that due to a miscalculation in the cryptography in the original translation of the Zodiac's code, investigators thought he was telling them to apply his instruction in terms of a radian angle. However, doing so did not seem to produce any visible correlations. It seemed to be another false lead. But Michael Cole is an engineer and familiar with radians. In his opinion, the Zodiac used the term to communicate to investigators that they should be thinking in terms of angles, but also possibly to deliberately send them off in a wrong direction. The logic may not compute for some, but in the mind of a serial killer, the logic is his own. Armed with this idea, Cole took another look at the case and discovered something interesting. He started with the Zodiac's crosshairs logo. It is basically a circle with a cross forming quadrants, or marking the cardinal points. The Zodiac's moniker was Cole's next clue. The word comes from the Greek for circle of animals. Our modern usage originates from the ring of constellations that the ancient Babylonians used to divide the ecliptic into 12 equal zones of celestial longitude. In Cole's view, it wasn't that the killer used the Zodiac to select his victims by astrological signs, but rather as a tool to predetermine the sites of his crimes. Cole then reasoned that the Zodiac applied a zodiacal wheel comprised of 12 sections of 30-degree angles. And in the book we picture the wheel with 12 sections defined by 30-degree angles. The map provided by the Zodiac instructed investigators to use an angle, setting the vertex point on Mount Diablo, and then stated that 0, or the top point of the angle, should be set to magnetic north, which is a 17-degree discrepancy to the east of true north. Following these instructions, Cole discovered that the sites of 2 Zodiac attacks were connected via Mount Diablo at a 60-degree angle. This, Cole believes, was the actual intention of the Zodiac's original statement. The Mount Diablo code concerns radians plus number sign inches along the radians, end quote. You could argue all day about why the Zodiac used the term radians, but it does not change the fact that degrees are what match his intent. Cole applied a zodiacal wheel to all the attack sites in the Bay Area, specifically the attacks associated with the killer during the time he identified himself personally as the Zodiac, and found that using Mount Diablo as the center point, all but one of the victims connect via 60-degree angles. When Cole applied the zodiacal wheel theory to supposed victims outside the Bay Area, he found that the Riverside victim in the Inland Empire also fit the formula. While Cole admits that some of the attack sites vary slightly from the degree lines, he still believes that the Zodiac used them as a basic guide and that the connections are too close to be purely coincidental. I will repeat, Cole found that using Mount Diablo as the center point showed that all but one of the victims connected via 60-degree angles. And Michael Cole has his own zodiac wheel model aligned with the 0 or top point tilted to 17 degrees to match magnetic north. And this is what he would use to put over the maps. I'll continue. The one Bay Area attack site that does not fit, according to Cole, is Lake Berryessa. However, Cole attributes this to the Zodiac having to extemporize, or perhaps it was a deliberate ploy to obscure the broader pattern. Then again, the Zodiac could have had another occult reason to pick Lake Berryessa. Let's take another look at all the sites of the Zodiac attacks. 4 men and 3 women were attacked in the following: Vallejo, Blue Rock Springs Park, Benicia at Lake Herman Road, Napa at Lake Berryessa, and San Francisco in the Presidio Heights. The murders attributed to the Zodiac prior to those in the Bay Area are a male and female killed at Gaviota State Beach near Santa Barbara, and a young woman brutally stabbed on the campus of Riverside City College. What else do they have in common? In past chapters, we've noted the presence of planetary grid lines and curvilinear telluric currents at the locations of the 1915 murders or deaths. One major intersection of several curvilinear lays or telluric currents sits in Glacier National Park on the Canadian border in Montana. From there, a major line curves southwest through Spokane, Washington, flowing on to Mount Shasta in Northern California and continuing south towards San Francisco Bay. This telluric current leads right to the Zodiac attack sites in Vallejo and Napa. Splitting north of Napa, one branch of this telluric ley current curves round southwest toward the bay. Along this line sits Lake Berryessa, site of the attack on 27 September 1969. The line continues across the bay and into the city, straight through to Presidio Heights, site of the murder on 11 October 1969. The second branch, dividing north of Napa, curves southeast through both Blue Rock Springs Park, site of the 4 July 1969 attack, and Lake Herman Road, site of the 20 December 1968 murders. Thus, all of the Bay Area Zodiac attacks took place along curvilinear ley lines of telluric current emanating from a common point. Now, Rick and I present a map of all this that I've just described, accomplished for us by Seshari. So we do provide graphics in the book to demonstrate the connections that we're talking about, and it is rather startling. I will continue. Does this suggest Mount Diablo is a telluric nexus? Perhaps so. Furthermore, the Zodiac killed at least 3 other people before he cast his shadow over the Bay Area. His first presumed victims date back to 4 June 1963, when he killed the young man and woman, Robert Dominguez and Linda Edwards, on a beach at Gaviota State Park near Santa Barbara. Gaviota is even closer to Point Conception, site of that sacred humcack of the Chumash. To no surprise, the area is intersected by another curvilinear line of telluric current which loops west from Los Angeles along the Santa Barbara coastline and out into the Pacific from that humcack spirit gate. And again, we present a map of all this provided to us by Seshari. The Zodiac's other claimed victim was Sherry Jo Bates, the girl murdered on 30 October 1966 in an alley off Terracina Road on the campus of Riverside City College, now Riverside Community College, just a few miles from San Bernardino. The site of Bates' murder lay within the framework of several lines of telluric current, one of which flows from a previously identified intersection of lines at Disneyland, across 2 counties and into downtown Riverside. But it is a main planetary grid line named the Axis of Equilibrium by our geomorphology consultant Seshari, which is the key here. This axis passes directly along the giant San Bernardino arrowhead's length, its traced direction marking a telluric ley line across the San Bernardino landscape southeast to downtown Riverside, specifically to a spot heavy with curvilinear and angled lines forming a very complex configuration of esoteric and telluric energy, according to Seshari. The heart of that telluric ley configuration in Riverside is the apex of an isosceles triangle, the long sides of which branch out accordingly. One of the lines branching off this isosceles triangle at the intersection of the axis of equilibrium and the center of the telluric ley configuration in downtown Riverside passes directly through the location of the Zodiac killer's murder of Sherry Jo Bates on the Riverside Community College campus. Essentially, the arrowhead points to the Bates murder site. I might add, too, that in subsequent volumes it is identified that this isosceles triangle configuration of telluric current is also the site of the Hecate Shrine discussed in Empire of the Wheel 3. not really discovered until after this first book was written. But this line, if you take a straight line through the San Bernardino arrowhead, it leads you to essentially the Sherry Jo Bates murder site. I will continue reading. Thus, every known and presumed victim of the Zodiac killer was attacked or killed on or nearly exactly relative to the Telluric ley currents, bar none. Not only that, the Zodiac clearly had an association with Southern California, specifically the Inland Empire. One prime suspect, Arthur Lee Allen, once resided in Riverside, and another was in Pomona at the time of the Bates Riverside murder. But aside from the Telluric or ley line connection, are there any other similarities between the Zodiac killings in our case? The Zodiac attacked 7 people in the Bay Area, 4 male and 3 female. In our theoretical San Bernardino working, we also have 7 victims, 4 males and 3 females. Interestingly, when one applies the Zodiac wheel to the San Bernardino working, the results are notable. Using the same method the Zodiac suggests in his letter and map, we aligned the 0 of our wheel to magnetic north and placed the center of the wheel to the major nodal point intersection at Urbita Springs Lake. 0 aligned to the giant arrowhead, indicating to us the arrowhead's approximate magnetic north alignment. And we also provide a map of this arrowhead site. In fact, let me make sure I'm not jumping over anything. In fact, similar to the Zodiac killer case, all 7 of the deaths in the San Bernardino working connect roughly at angles with a common denominator, that of 15. The victims in our mystery find connection to one another at 30, 45, 60, or 90-degree angles, when the center of the zodiacal wheel is placed at the Urbita Springs Park nodal point. We reiterate, as does Cole in his theory, that this rough association of the angles is close enough to suggest an attempt at alignment. In our mystery, the angles are all close enough to multiples of 15, which is synchronistic to the year 1915 when all this happened, to suggest the inspired attempt of alignment found in the Zodiac killer case. Did the Zodiac learn something about the theoretical process of magical victim placement that made him cite his attacks at only his apparent preference of 60-degree angles? This to us is as significant as the giant arrowhead being pretty much aligned to magnetic north. And we also in the book provide a map of the San Bernardino area with the Zodiac Michael Cole model of the zodiacal wheel to demonstrate all these alignments at these said angles. We remind the reader that when dealing with homicidal psychopaths, their logic is their own, and circumstances may have forced the killers to commit their acts in roughly aligned locations because being exact was not possible for reasons unanticipated or uncontrollable by the killers or killer. Regardless of the flaws that may seem inherent, apparently close enough was good enough for the perpetrators in both cases, in our estimation. Is this association between the lines and the site of the Zodiac killer murder sites merely coincidence? How about the coincidence, so to speak, of the carousel? By Sechery's calculations, a major straight planetary grid line that passes through Tilden Park in the Bay Area, just to the east of Berkeley, California. During the Zodiac killings, Tilden Park already owned the carousel in question. Remember, we have proven through our research that this was the very same carousel that spun merrymakers around in Urbita Springs Park 50 years earlier, the year of our mystery. This carousel had been built by Herschel Spillman for Urbita Springs Park in San Bernardino in 1911. A carousel, of course, is essentially a rotating wheel, yet another manifestation of the wheel sacred to both St. Catherine and Hecate, the Chumash wheel petroglyphs, the Zodiac circular symbol, and a nodal point of radiating telluric currents, one of which likely ran through the 1915 position of the carousel. Recall that the very definition of the word zodiac means circle of animals, which is a pretty clear description of a carousel. And what about the Voodoo Damballah? Consider the eerie familiarity between the zodiac symbol tilted to magnetic north, but mostly the zodiac wheel in Cole's theory tilted the equivalent 17 degrees, and consider this depiction of the Voodoo Damballah, an important element of which is also tilted to roughly equivalent, if not exact, 17 degrees. Now, we provide in the book side-by-side illustrations of the Michael Cole Zodiac killer wheel adjusted to the 17 degrees as pretty much instructed by the Zodiac killer himself, and we show the Voodoo Damballah wheel, and it is essentially identical. This is one of the creepier things we discovered. I will continue reading. The Damballah represents the geometric perfection of the mysteries and has been linked by scholars to the Egyptian mysteries, which are linked to Hecate as demonstrated in the very name of Egyptian magic, Heka. In the center of a voodoo temple is a symbol of the rising sun represented by a vertical symbol surrounded by other symbols. Likewise, in an Egyptian temple depicting a rising sun on the horizon, also surrounded by the same symbols. The cult of St. Catherine is associated with the rising sun as well, bringing us full circle, pardon the pun. Even the heads of the snakes on the Damballah wheel extend beyond the circumference, just as do the spokes of Catherine's wheel. Were the Zodiac's symbol and his murderous acts influenced by the Voodoo Damballah, and a synchronicity to our mystery unknown to him or even them? Or did the Zodiac know something about the 1915 deaths that was unexplored until now? Coincidence upon coincidence upon coincidence. However, James Shelby Downard might argue that there was no coincidence at all, rather subtle indications of the occult connections between places, people, and things. Others have suggested, based on perceived certain patterns in his language and his apparent appreciation of Gilbert and Sullivan, that Zodiac was British or familiar with Anglophile ways. And there is the British undercurrent in the San Bernardino working, evidenced by E.P. Braid, the Indian interlude of Mark Shaw, even the brief appearance of Aleister Crowley, not to mention the sinister Manby. The Zodiac evidently knew something about cryptography, from which some have deduced a military or intelligence association. Whatever their involvement in the working itself, as we have shown, there were undoubtedly intelligence types moving through and around the Inland Empire in 1915. Another startling similarity and possible link between the San Bernardino working deaths and the Zodiac killer murders is an undercurrent of the occult. Allegations of occult involvement in the Zodiac case have circulated for years, including one anonymous letter claiming that he was nothing less than a follower of Aleister Crowley, perhaps one more bit of lore used to slander the mage by association in the years since his death. It is likely that Crowley would have had as low opinion of the Zodiac as he did of charlatan spiritualists of his own lifetime. Moving on, we see in his letters that the Zodiac admitted that his basic aim in the killings was to collect slaves, or souls, to serve him in the afterlife. He also had an evident grasp on astrology, and based on what we've laid out here, ley energy as well. The latter, of course, also seems to have been of vital importance to the perpetrators of the 1915 crimes. As in the 1915 crimes, the occult angle also raises the possibility that the Zodiac was not, as generally assumed, a lone wolf killer, but possibly part of a group or someone acting on a group's instructions. Thus, investigators may have failed to solve the case in part because they were chasing after a solitary man who didn't exist. Was the person who wrote the Zodiac's letters the same one who carried out the killings? And was the killer in each case truly identical? Such a scenario reduces the Zodiac killer to a Downardian phantasm created and manipulated by unseen hands for their own arcane purposes. This may be why Arthur Lee Allen could never actually be pinned, because the evidence was spread across a team of killers. Of course, that's basically what we have postulated was going on some 50 years ago, and 50 years prior to the Zodiac killings, now over 100 years ago from today, in San Bernardino. It seems extremely unlikely that the Zodiac himself could have had any direct association with the 1915 events, as intriguing as that possibility might be. Assuming that he was a mere 20-year-old in that year, 1915, he would have been 73 in 1968, a bit long in the tooth to have carried out all of the Zodiac's known exploits. But groups live much longer than men individually and renew themselves with fresh blood, both literal and figurative. We have suggested that the killer or killers behind all or most of the 1915 deaths were not an isolated phenomenon, but possibly, and disturbingly, linked to a sleeper cell of occult-motivated agents in California and further afield. The Zodiac, so to speak, individually or collectively, could have been a manifestation of the same group, or its revival. The difference in style, i.e. the disguised nature of the 1915 killings versus the in-your-face attitude of the Zodiac, could as much have been a reflection of the differing attitudes of the times as anything else. Among his statements of a supposed 37 victims, the Zodiac claimed that there were several yet to be discovered in Southern California. He also claimed that he had made several of the killings look like accidents or something other than murder. Suicides, perhaps? Could one of the San Bernardino working killers have been one among a team of Zodiac killers? We find the synchronicities to our mystery too intriguing to ignore, but the reader may still disagree. Consider this additional point. Toyne Newton, in his book The Dark Worship, cites that the ancient Greeks associated the number 100 with Hecate, and to take it further, they also associated Hecate as a great year of twice 50 months. The Dogon tribe of Africa described the 50-year orbital cycle of Sirius by counting it twice, thus equaling 100 years. Is it not interesting that the Zodiac arrives on the scene almost exactly 50 years after our 1915 mystery? The murders of Robert Domingos and Linda Edwards at Gaviota Beach Park in 1963 and the Sherry Joe Bates murder in 1966 in Riverside, with his claims of many more bodies not found, we cannot be certain that the Zodiac did not kill anyone in 1965, a more exact match in the 50-year cycle consideration. We simply must put it on the table with everything else because 48 years is pretty close when dealing with a psychotic mind. And that's the span of years between an exact 50-year measurement for the Domingos and Edwards Zodiac murders at Gaviota in 63. Why not 38 years? Why not 62? This 48-year proximity to 50 years may ultimately be dismissed, but it cannot be ignored. Perhaps what is most disturbing about this possibility of a 50-year cycle is that, as of this writing, 2011, we are coming up on the 100th anniversary of the deaths of 1915, 50 years after the emergence of the Zodiac. Of course, we can now look back and realize that that was a bit of a prediction that Rick and I made back in 2011, that unfortunately came true with the 2015 terrorist attacks in San Bernardino, which I have done a video on that at the YouTube channel that lays out the details, disturbingly presenting the synchronicities, the exact synchronicities. So I'll read that little bit again and then continue. This was written in 2011, and I'm reading. Perhaps what is most disturbing about this possibility of a 50-year cycle is that we are coming up on the 100th anniversary of the deaths of 1915, 50 years after the emergence of the Zodiac. And in what I was just saying about the great year and the veneration of Hecate in 100 using two sets of 50, you've got the 50-year difference between the San Bernardino working 1915 deaths and the Zodiac, and then the 50-year difference between the emergence of the Zodiac and the 2015 terrorist attacks in San Bernardino. And the 2015 terrorist attacks are exactly, 100 years after the San Bernardino working, and specifically on the 2nd of December, which is the exact date of one of the victims, victim number 6. I will continue. Of course, the Zodiac Killer case was only one episode in a history of occult-laced crime in the Golden State, a history of which we argue the San Bernardino working is a heretofore unknown chapter. A little more than a decade after our San Bernardino working deaths in 1915, horror struck the nearby community of Wineville when local resident Gordon Northcott, abetted by other members of his family, abducted, tortured, and murdered at least 4 young boys, possibly many more. Whether Northcott acted solely on his own twisted desire or partly at the instigation of shadowy others, based upon his own statements, remains one of the many puzzles in the Northcott case. Consider that Wineville, since renamed to Miraloma, is merely over the hill west of Riverside, and the Telluric lay configuration connected to the Zodiac murder site of Sherry Joe Bates. In the immediate wake of the Zodiac killings, Northern California authorities arrested one Stanley Dean Baker, who not only subsequently confessed to being a cannibal, but also a member of a satanic cult dubbed the Four Pi. At its head, allegedly, sat a sinister and well-connected figure known only as the Grand Shingon, and its dark tentacles extended throughout California and the West. Writers such as Ed Saunders, author of The Family, Maury Terry, author of The Ultimate Evil, and more recently, Adam Gorightly, in his excellent and exhaustive book, The Shadow over Santa Susana, have in turn uncovered possible ties with that group to Charles Manson and his homicidal followers, as well as the Son of Sam murders, which terrorized the New York area in the 1970s. Let's not overlook the more recent 1980s drug lord Adolfo Constanzo, a former tarot card reader and murderous leader of the Matamoros cult that sacrificed victims in the belief that they would draw power from their souls. As a teenager, Constanzo had reportedly learned the drug trade from a Palo Mayombe voodoo priest. Remember that Damballah wheel we were talking about? We suggested it is sufficiently significant that themes of occult-driven homicide with the goal of power over the elements, natural and supernatural, are prevalent enough in the past century that it bears mention here. We argue that the Zodiac killings share with our San Bernardino mystery too many similarities of a specific nature to be dismissed. Admittedly, while we have detected some pattern, we still as yet cannot completely identify it. While we have considered the single killer option, the startling and highly improbable possibility that the Zodiac killer himself could have been alive and able to commit the San Bernardino working murders, it is intriguingly more likely that he might have learned of the killings of 1915 and attempted to emulate them, or was part of a team of killers, thus accounting for the range of ages applied to the killer by witnesses. A darker possibility is that the Zodiac was told of the San Bernardino working and carried out the murders at the behest of an occult group, possibly descended from that which carried it out that autumn roughly 50 years prior, the halfway point of the Hecate measure of 100 years. Will another killer or group of killers take up the torch, as did Hecate herself, and venture into a psychological subterranea of homicidal madness in veneration of the coming centennial of the San Bernardino working? If nothing else, we suggest the authorities may determine if the Zodiac's claim of many unfound victims in Southern California is valid by looking for clues, if not physical evidence, along the Telluric ley currents. Unsolved cases from the killer's era that link to these lines could possibly reveal the Zodiac's guilty hand and give closure to families and friends. It is worth a try. Some may insist that such tales of cult involvement are nothing but the rants of madmen and the overactive imaginations of writers. Others more knowledgeable argue that they are genuine manifestations of a dark underground reality, the existence of which most of us would rather not confront nor fathom. What did San Bernardino Police Chief Walter Shea ultimately conclude in 1915? We may never know. That was chapter 23 from the first volume of the Empire of the Wheel trilogy. This first volume was written by myself, Walter Bosley, and Richard B Spence. And you can find this book only print on demand at lulu.com.